This is Unpivot, the show for Excel and Power BI fans and anyone who likes chatting about data. I'm Giles Male.
I'm Mark Proctor.
I'm Sue Bays.
I'm Rick de Groot.
And the big news, well, there's two bits of big news. We've got to start with the fact that I'm in charge, haven't we? Mark, hit it with jingle one, please.
Jingle one, okay.
Get comfortable, Pete.
None of us are taking any responsibility for these jingles. These are
How many are
there? You don't want to know. Right, here's jingle one.
Unprepared.
Go to the beginning.
Oh, no.
Back to the beginning.
The stages.
You've ruined it.
Oh,
no,
I know, but it won't let me.
it must do.
Hang on, let me play something else.
What's going on? There we go. This is beautiful.
This is my chance. It's all on me. No turning back. The world will see. Sue looks nervous. Mark looks scared. Rick might be feeling unprepared. The stage is set. The crowd is loud. I'll make my humble self so proud. From the shadows to the light, Excel star is shining bright. Remember me, the humble MVP, taking Unpivot to its knees. Never forget this epic tide. It's been one hell of a ride. You can't leave Giles in charge, they say, but these memories just won't fade away. To number one, his star will soar, riding waves till he can't no more. From simple sums to grand designs, in every line the numbers shine. Pivot tables and graphs so sleek.
He doesn't know how to fade it out. There you go.
There we go.
Oh, what a start.
Rick, name my play. Hierbij heb ik niks veranderd aan de equalizer setting.
Rick, what have you got going on there? You got some noise.
Where did that come from?
What's happening?
So recently I had to upgrade one of my microphones. But what I never guessed was that this microphone doesn't work so well if it doesn't get enough electricity. So after purchasing this one, I had to buy a mixer that delivers enough electricity on there. But then I found out that this mixer allows you to put all kinds of tunes in there. So you just heard one of those buttons just getting in there while we're talking. So I guess we're having 3 mixers on the show today here.
I think so.
Oh.
Right, so we've got to start. We have you as a special guest, Rick. So I'm sure loads of our listeners will know who you are. But do you want to kind of do an intro for yourself to everyone?
Sure. Let me give you a short intro then. My name is Rick. Most of you might know me from the blog that I run, BI Gorilla. I'm actually just a boring accountant. But over the years, I turned mostly to automating in Excel, all the fun stuff. You know, all that stuff that comes back every month. That's how I slowly started to get into that area. And I guess 8 years later, I'm mostly doing Power BI and teaching people the clicks of Power Query these days. Yeah. I'm based in the Netherlands. Sorry, Sue. What's that?
Your website is amazing, Rick.
I'm glad you found it helpful. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and you know that actually looking up how stuff works is just really, really fun.
But you've got BI Gorilla, but also Gorilla.bi is your main site, but then there's powerquery.how, which is the documentation which we all wish Microsoft would have written.
That's it's the website that I started last year, and the fun thing is that when it started, I got a lot of complaints that things were similar to what Microsoft had, and the honest truth is it was identical to what Microsoft had. But I de-indexed everything, so it wasn't to be found on Google. And now over the last year, it's slowly expanding with some fun examples, with contributions, and I think by now there's over 450 unique articles there with pictures and samples. And I think you've had some contributions there as well, Mark, with what you've been sharing.
Well, what many people don't know is that about 3 years ago, I decided I was going to create a reference site for Power Query. I think Rick might know this. So I started it. I started really simple, some really basic functions. And after 10 posts, I was like, this thing is so dull that I then just gave up. It's still there, to be honest. If you go to the website, I assume it's still there. I haven't looked in months, but it's still there. It still gets some Google traffic, which is interesting. But and then Rick came out with powerquery.how. I was like, there's no way I'm going to go back and do all of that. It is like just working through all of that is phenomenal. And there's so many times that you go through the Power Query on Microsoft and you find an argument that they've just completely ignored as if it doesn't exist. They don't even list it in their own documentation. And then you go to powerquery.how and there it is. Rick's explained it. He's got examples. It's all good.
How much of your time does that take, Rick, to kind of manage that site?
Well, I gotta agree with Mark here that it's really boring stuff to do if you want to do this like all the time. So for me, it's more like sometimes I grab like a morning where I'm like, okay, I feel like updating like 5 or 6 articles. I just put it out there and then I just leave it for another week or so. And the quick part was with easy functions like list functions or text functions. But the moment that you want to get pictures in there and get a good data set, that's when it starts to feel like a day job almost. And yeah, I guess the trick is in just incrementally adding a few articles here and there. Yeah.
And Rick, I mean, I realized that we haven't even got onto news. We're still on introductions, but so no, I think people will be fascinated about this because Rick created this system for his blog for creating his table of contents for his blog post using Power Query, right? So it goes to his website and then it pulls out all the H1s and H2 tags that are in the web article, and then it creates the table of contents. I know this because I completely stole this idea from Rick, and I thought that's genius. So what did you do on powerquery.how? Have you got all of those kind of things happening as well in the background? So using Power Query to generate your pages, how did that work?
So there's gonna be developers listening to this who are gonna laugh and I think like, Rick, what the hell have you been doing? But I'll tell you the honest truth with this. powerquery.how started as a huge experiment, and you can find all of the metadata that Microsoft has on their website. You can just find it in the shared the shared function. You can paste that in your formula bar, and by doing that, you first get all of the functions basically. But within all of the functions, you can get the metadata with descriptions, examples. You can see what arguments are in there. So one day I just started to explore like, how can I extract all of those, get the formatting right, and make sure I get that out there for each of the articles on my website. And basically from there, I started to modularly build up all of the HTML for my website. Because basically a WordPress page, you can click on code, and just like you can see Power Query code, there is some basic HTML code that you need. So it started like that, and basically slowly but surely I started to iterate for all of those articles that I could, with a press of the button, get all of that info out there. And after doing that, after getting that base out, I just downloaded a plugin, and from Excel I now get a CSV, and that CSV is simply uploaded to WordPress, and that's how it's updated every time.
Very clever.
Very, very, very cool. Should we do I'm conscious, like I don't know what we're doing structure wise, but there was a plan, wasn't there? Yeah, that's why I'm saying we should do the news bit. News. Yes. Does anybody have any professional, personal, controversial news?
Me.
Okay. What have you got? Oh, Budapest.
I ran the marathon. I ran Budapest Marathon. What have you got? He says in question. Budapest Marathon 3:55. Wait. Boston qualifier.
Well
Yay.
Well done.
Wow. Is that a personal record too?
No. 3:52 is my personal record, but I was a bit injury on my ankle from kicking off my boot whilst walking the dog.
Sub 4 marathon with an injury. It's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Serious. So I was really, really chuffed, and I'm okay again now. So I've got another one in a week and a half. So that's my news, running news.
And should I then imagine that 1 hour in, your ankle started to hurt, or was this somewhere along the end of your marathon?
It wasn't too bad. It was just it was sort of more the last 4 weeks leading up to it, 4 or 5 weeks leading up to it. I couldn't do the final sort of fast running part. Oh, that's my dog. Fast running. Hang on.
Oh, he's not happy with you, is he?
No, hang on.
So Rick, have you ever? I know that Rick's a runner, because when we were in Seattle at the last MVP summit, Rick said to me, "Oh, do you want to come out running?" And after I stopped laughing, I just said no. I just pointed at him and just laughed in his face. So Rick, have you ever done a marathon? What's your longest distance?
I wish. Actually, I played soccer for over 14 years. Then due to injuries, I decided to stop. But the thing with soccer was always, I never enjoyed the training. So they wanted you to be in a good conditioning, have good stamina. But I just hated it because everybody would run faster than I did. And for some reason, that was just the part that was hard. But actually, after I stopped that, like the soccer competitions, people started to ask me to join with little competitions of, let's say, 5 or 10K. And somebody took me up on it. And for some reason, it seemed really fun to train with him. And I guess nowadays I usually run 5 to 10K max. Sue, that's definitely not a marathon. But short distances here and there.
Yeah, 5 or 10K at speed can be, really hardcore as well. But yeah,
Sue
Win is going to be another runner.
Oh, he'll be chuffed. Hi, Win. Win will be listening. You say hi. Hello, Win.
Yeah.
Hope you're enjoying it. Sue and I had a great time in Budapest, though, because I basically celebrated with her afterwards as if I had run the marathon. So we both had the most insane amount of food and drink.
Show your weight gain. Show your weight gain.
I mean, no, it's too much. It's too much. But I agree with you, Rick. I'm similar. When I get into the longer training plans, I just get bored. I get really bored with training. Okay. Any other news?
Tell us about beer spa. Did you go to the beer spa?
Well, we went to a spa. It was
beer.
fascinating. We drank beer. We went to a spa. We didn't go in a bath that had hoppy stuff in. It was just fascinating. People watching, just out of intrigue in spas like that, is a very interesting experience. It was great, wasn't it, Sue?
Yeah, had a fabulous time. Really enjoyed it.
Loved it.
So, yeah.
Any other news?
Anyone else news?
I've not got any other news. There's no news about my stolen number plate. Nothing to update on. It's all gone quiet.
I've got Rick news.
Go on,
Rick. I've got a jingle for you.
Right. Let's bring it on. Let's see what you've made up.
You ready?
Jingle.
Is it number 2, Giles? Here we go.
It's number 2. It's cool. I thought you were cool, so I've given you a cool jingle.
Rick de Groot, the Power Query Knight. He'll sort your data with incredible might. He wrote a book so big and bright, turning chaos into insight. It's Rick de Groot, he's got the key, unlocks the numbers, sets them free. Data wizard, MVP, watch him work, you'll agree. Just like Chris Angel, his name is cool. Rick loves a spreadsheet.
You can fade out at any point. It's about 2 minutes long. I don't have any other news, but I got you a cool jingle. There you go.
Giles, I need to get this as my voicemail. For some reason, when people call me, I want this to be my voicemail. Can you share this with me?
100%. It's yours after the show. I have no other news, though. What about you, Rick? Any news?
I do have some news here back home. What most of you don't know is that in my dinner room, I actually always installed a big screen. I got my camera here. I got the mic. Everything is here. But whenever we get people for dinner over, I need to get rid of everything, the lamps, the connections, all of the cables. And just yesterday, I installed one of those desks that can go up and down.
Oh yeah.
And that means that the dinner table could move to the other room. And I finally never have to move these things around anymore. So this is huge for me. This is a big thing. And actually, there's a reason that I got that. Because on other news, I have finally started working on my powerquery M course. So it's not there yet. I've stoked Mark for 2 years about it already. I think Mark told me 2.5 years ago, like, Rick, just get started. And it took some courage to get started, but that's all in the pipeline right now.
Oh, exciting!
Awesome. How long do you think that's going to take?
What was that?
How long do you think it'll take to complete?
That is a very good question. I'm hoping that in 3 months I can give you a nice product to test, and that in the coming time I can have a beta group of people that I can already showcase some masterclasses to. So I'm going to see if I can find some people who are interested in getting some feedback. They're going to get quality training. They're going to get access to the course after, but it's mostly going to be helpful to see if this is delivering them what they expect. So that's what I'm planning on for the next month. So if any of you guys feel like hopping in some powerquery M code and want to be part of the beta group,
Very
I'm happy
to. Yeah. Count me in if you want me. I'll be there.
Sounds awesome. And the good news is, Rick, you've already written the book, so you already know enough about powerquery and M code to actually run a course, which is always a good start.
I sure hope so. I guess the biggest challenge here is now making sure we don't have too much to deliver.
Should we talk about the book? We've got to talk about the book, haven't we? Because I mean, I know it's been out for a while, but we've never had you on the show before. Like you in conjunction.
Giles, you got to wait till the main question. The main question.
Oh, what's the main question? Hang on. Oh, it's about books. It's about all right. Ignore that. We'll save that. This is why I'm not completely in charge, and Mark has control of the jingles and the general admin.
You kept saying that all the time we were away. It's like, I'm in charge. I'm going to be in charge. And I went, Mark's got admin rights.
Yeah. Does that mean you can mute me?
I can even kick you out of the entire session.
I did not know that.
Yep.
That's outrageous.
It's true. It's true.
All right.
So,
well, look,
with you being in charge, Giles, shall I suggest that maybe we move on to question of the week?
That's exactly what I was about to say, but you got there before me. I was trying to do my host duties. I've got my notes on my phone. Shall we move to the what is it? Question of the week. There's a jingle for that.
There is a jingle. Let's go.
This is going to win.
It's that time in the Unpivot show where we pose a question and tell you what we know. We may be right, we may be wrong. It's just an excuse to play this song. It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week. It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week.
I didn't feel like we needed a different question of the week jingle. That was perfectly good enough. All right, so the question of the week is, when is good? Oh, Rick, you can come back. What else have you got? Can you just give us a few samples? What else have you got on that?
Don't tell him, Rick. Don't tell him.
It's going to be a surprise. I can't give you all right away. There's more
I feel
coming.
like you've turned the tables on me because I was like, I'm going to make this really chaotic for you, and now I'm nervous.
We said at the beginning before we came on that Mark's got admin rights. Giles is in charge. Rick is our guest, and I just get to play.
This is not how I expected my hosting extravaganza to go. I feel completely out of control already.
Good.
Anyway, the question of the week is: at what point does good become good enough? When do you become an expert in something? Who wants to kick that off?
Rick.
Go on, Rick.
I'll take this one. I've thought about this a lot because when are you an expert? And it feels like when you're starting that you become an expert when you're just a little bit better than you are now, right? Just like when you ask someone that's like on an advanced level, what is advanced? Well, once you get a topic, it's not advanced anymore, right? Because then you can explain it to people and it's in you. So when I was thinking of when you're an expert, I think for sure you're gonna have to be able to solve the most common problems with ease, right? So if people come up to you with questions on a technology that you work with, let's say for example Power BI, I think you're an expert if at least you're able to solve these common problems. But when you get to a level of understanding that you can place any question, any challenge there in the broader context of a product, I think that also shows that you're an expert in your field. Now, that's just when it starts, because one thing that I've thought about a lot is what content creators do. And it's just slightly, it's directly related to being an expert, because one thing that content creators do that experts also do is they see something they challenge with and they come up with their own solutions. So being able to come up with solutions that aren't already out there, I think that's another characteristic of becoming an expert in your field.
Nice. Sue, how about you?
But it's funny because we were having this conversation, weren't we? And I said, it sort of ties in with imposter syndrome in a way, is that I think like you say, Rick, once you start being able to answer the questions that people ask you, then you feel that you're an expert. But also then the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn. So with DAX, I'm pretty good with DAX and I can make it work and do what I want, but I'm also conscious, because I know so much to a level, that there are so many other really specific levels that I don't, it's almost like the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn. And because I do lots of bits of things, so I'm like sort of, because I work for myself and I'm spread all over the platform, I need to know DAX, I need to know PowerQuery, I need to know Python, I need, there's lots of things I need to know, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert in any of those, because I'm not specialized, but I have enough knowledge to know what I know and to know where to find what I know. And the questions that I need to, and I think this is really important as well, is the questions I need to ask to get results, and the people that I want to ask those questions from. So I think it depends on where you are in your journey, depends upon your level of expertise.
And would you consider yourself an expert then? Even though you're saying like you're focusing on a lot of different areas, are you comfortable mentioning yourself as an expert in any of these areas?
I'm not, but other people do. But I think that's just me. So I think that's just who I am. So I know I can usually solve things. I can get to the answers and I can solve things in most of the things that I touch base on. But I think quite often that's being slightly obsessive as well, in having to solve a problem. But I guess so. I get it, but it depends who you yourself with. So if we go back to running, apparently I'm an elite marathon runner, but I would never see myself as that. But,
so you don't call yourself. I don't know if you've watched. Sue's dog is on the rampage again. I don't know if you've watched some of the previous episodes or listened to Rick, but Sue doesn't call herself a coder. And then she drops all these massive coding bombs, and Mark and I and Win are just like, "You're definitely a coder."
When someone says, "I just cobbled together a C# script," I just wrote some stuff in Python and it just worked, and it's like, yeah, you're definitely not a coder if you can write actual languages. No, it doesn't qualify.
Yeah, but I'm not in it all the time, so I have to do bits of things. But I think that's the point. As to some people I am, but I'm always like, I compare myself to Marco, and so I would consider him to be an expert, not me. But it's where you are on your journey.
Mark, how about you?
So in terms of it's a tough, because what is an expert? And you're almost, if you think about yourself, you're never an expert, because it's as Rick said, once something might be deemed to be advanced, but once you know it, it's no longer advanced for you because you already know it and understand it. So there's an element of you can never see yourself as an expert, but other people can see you as an expert, especially, and you have to think about who you're talking to. And I mentioned to Giles before we started, I've heard someone say that you're an expert if you're one step ahead of the person who you're talking to, because to them, you know more than them, so therefore you must be an expert. But I think we tend to chase this, or people trying to find people who are experts, and we compare ourselves to others, and we end up comparing ourselves to an amalgamation of others. And I think I've probably said this before on the podcast, is that if I compare myself to Rick, I might say, I don't know as much about Power Query as Rick does. I'll then compare myself to Giles, and I'll say, I don't know as much about financial modeling as Giles does. I'll then compare myself to Sue, and I'll say, I don't know as much about Power BI, Dynamic Links Lab, or whatever it was called last time. So, I don't know as much about Tabular Editor as Sue, so therefore I'm not an expert. And so you compare yourself to all these other people, and therefore you end up deeming that you're not an expert, but because you're comparing yourself against everyone in the entire world. And I remember when I became an MVP, there's these email distribution groups that you can join, and I joined the Power BI group. And there's a person who is an absolute expert, who is literally knows everything on the topic. And in that email group, they asked a question, which was even I knew the answer. It seemed like the most basic question in the world. And I was like, oh, I know this. I didn't write that. I didn't respond to that because I didn't want to look like a fool. But equally, it's kind of like we think of people as experts, but actually we specialize in certain areas. And then we just have to be okay with leaving enormous gaping black holes of information that we don't know. And I think that's okay. We need to get to the point where we're happy with our own skill. We can solve the problems that come along, or at least have some idea of how to solve the problems that come along. And also, I think there's an element of knowing if someone comes to you with a question, knowing that something isn't possible or why it isn't possible, and knowing why something isn't possible because you've been through that experience of learning those things, you've made those mistakes yourself. I think they're the things that make you an expert. If someone can ask you a question, you're like, there's no way you're going to do this. Someone asked me a Power Query question the other day, and the answer was just, no way, that's not what Power Query is for. So don't even think about it. You've got to use these other methods. And so I think just being able to advise people, definitely don't use this, is a level of expertise, because you actually understand how things work and how things fit together, because you've been through that experience. I suspect that if you think about how words derive, maybe expert probably is derived from the word experience in Latin. They probably, I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go along, but they probably derive from a similar base. My knowledge.
You're making lots of sense, and I'd agree. Sometimes it's knowing what's the best tool for the job as well, and the purpose.
But I think that's really hard to do nowadays in our space, I think, more than ever, because I'm going to talk about this in Vegas in a month. Because if you think of like the big fish in small pond thing, I think that happens a lot with Excel people in companies. You get the Excel expert because they're the best person at the company. But then when you step back and look at the art of the possible now with even just Power Query or the data model or Power BI, Sue was sat with me, walking me through Fabric in Budapest. And as Sue was showing me all this stuff, I was thinking, we actually have to know this to be experts now, because you need to know when to say, this is a better option than Excel, or potentially even just local Power Query. So like being an expert now to me feels harder than it's ever been, just because there's so many options on the table to solve a problem.
If I think back to go on, Rick.
At the same time, I feel like there's a bit of a pitfall here, because if we expect ourselves to be an expert before we can share our knowledge, are we ever going to share it? It's actually what happened when blogging at the start. Like, if I wanted my blog post to be perfect, I would never publish. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so that's how it started. But if you take something as a draft and you're like, you know what, I just want to share this, and this might give an answer to somebody who actually needs it at that moment. And it's not perfect, and maybe somebody is going to correct me, but let's hope they do, because in that case, first of all, people are going to be helped by what you posted. And second of all, we're going to learn from others who are going to correct you. And then everybody gets better, right? And I think this is what stops a lot of people from posting and voicing their opinion. But nobody tells you that you can't be wrong, right? Today I got a YouTube comment from somebody like, Rick, I see that you're making this 445 calendar and there's a super complex step here. Why don't you do it like this? And I looked at it and I had to get my Power BI file and I wanted to fiddle with it for a bit to see if that solution actually worked. And I looked at it and I was like, well, actually, that's so much easier than what I did. So I gave him credits and I updated the post. And yeah, I guess we're all better now.
Oh, definitely. It's and also sometimes you don't want the highly complex. You want it from someone that's just learned it or whose brain works in the same way that your brain works. So I know I've read posts before and I've just thought, I don't understand. It's far too technical for me. It's going really deep, and I actually need to start at the ground level and then delve deeper and deeper. So and part of your learning journey and knowing that you've done things more complex, or you've done, and other people reaching out and saying, well, actually try this. I did a session in Newcastle on Thursday about Jupyter notebooks, and I was just explaining about something you need to do with using a pipeline, and someone afterwards, we were chatting about it, and they came up with a couple of other solutions that I hadn't considered. So, like you say, Rick, we're always learning from each other, but as you're exploring things, other people can benefit from your journey.
Currently, I'm working on a dynamic arrays and lambdas course. So purposely over the last few months, I've been creating YouTube videos on things that will be covered in this course, but releasing those videos before I record the course content. You put it out there, and then you get to see people's comments and questions, and you then get the people saying, "Oh, I would have done it this way. Why haven't you done it that way?" And therefore, whatever you know, because often it was mentioned earlier about the big fish in the small pond, because how often do we actually get to interact with people that are experts and more knowledgeable in other areas? Not that often. So often on LinkedIn or by releasing a YouTube video, you get everyone else's knowledge by then going, why haven't you tried this? And I never even thought about doing it that way. Sometimes people's suggestions, I think, yeah, that's better. Sometimes I think they're worse. But equally, it's that process of I've released this video. I think it's the best I can do. As Rick said, there's a certain element of I'm going to spend 6-7 hours recording and editing a video and then putting it out there in the hope that it's the best. That's the best version I can do. And then by people responding, it means that when it actually comes to implementing it in this course, I've now got all the information from other people, how other people think about arrays, how people are handling various scenarios. That means that's now baked into that course, and hopefully it'll be the best course there is around that topic, because so many people have inputted into that. And I think, Giles, you've had a similar scenario with when you've done your challenges, haven't you? Because you've been doing your live Lambda challenges, and then someone's been adding comments and suggestions about other things you can try, and that is absolute gold, because people who comment, I mean, it's quite a high level topic already. People who comment are then people who are either experienced similar things or know more than you. So it's just fantastic.
So I agree, and I've loved that process personally, because I don't mind showing that I'm a bit rubbish compared to the top guys with Let and Lambda and things like that, and it's just helped me get better. The only thing I would say as an observation is the four of us are coming at this from a trainery sort of sharing content and getting feedback perspective. And what was in my mind a little bit more was, imagine Sarah, who I'm using this because this is literally the example for Vegas. Imagine Sarah starts a job as an accountant or an analyst, and Bob, her Excel guru, just happens to be a VBA guru, and the only thing he is a VBA guru. If he's not aware of the broader art of the possible, because he hasn't bothered and he thinks VBA is the best solution for everything, which is what VBA people do, then Sarah is just going to come out from that being like, oh, VBA is great. So I guess my other angle on it is like, outside of training and sharing content, it's really risky if you just get really dogmatic and go, no, Excel's what I've used for 20 years and it works. Why would I ever need to look past it? And Sue's intro to me with Fabric from an enterprise level was really like, oh, wow, I get this. Like, even just using Power Query locally across a finance team in silos, when you get into enterprise level, that's actually probably the wrong solution. Like, there should be a top-down cloud-based Fabric-esque solution to manage data.
Data flows in the service is it's just pushing that data transformation as far upstream as you can, so that everyone takes advantage of the transformations. Yeah.
In a way, I guess it all really depends on what your background has been and what kind of projects you're involved in. I think many of us have started in the Excel world and then moved on to Power BI, Power Query, started to do some visualization. But you don't easily get involved in projects then that are very database oriented and where maybe your colleagues use Python to automate some things. And I've been lucky over the last 4 or 5 years. I've worked with a group of guys from a company called Data Hub. They feel like friends, they feel like colleagues. I'm still self-employed, but we pick up bigger projects together. And that has allowed me to see and to get educated on what they build for the enterprise customers.
Awesome.
Which is helpful because they would never hire me by myself because I'm like a freelancer. But it's helpful for them as well because I can help them with some very complex requirements. And it gives you some teaching on the job of what does it look like if you want a serious enterprise environment. But I don't think it's that everybody gets that opportunity to know about SQL, to know what a good model looks like, to know what requirements on that level are required and how to govern that. And I guess in that sense, to have a discussion like this and to feel like an expert, I feel like we got to categorize ourselves as a certain profile.
I'll tell you what made the difference for me. It was Rob Colley's book with Avi Singh, so taking us into books. I can't remember what it's called. People will be shouting it out. But Rob and Avi did a book about moving from Excel to Power BI and how if you have that data gene, then you're not happy to sat looking at the machine for 20 minutes while your code runs. You're thinking, and you have to do it every day. You're thinking, well, how can I do that better? How can I, improve? And it's having that questioning mind. And I suspect most of the people listening to this will be of that nature. And then once you realize that you're not alone in your obsession of not just sitting there and letting it happen and tinkering and trying to make it better, then I think you feel more part of a community, and the books and sharing knowledge and being part of a community enable you to learn in that way. So even if you don't have it in your job, you can learn about it, and there's so many different resources, and then you can, if you're interested, you can then start to evolve with the work that you do.
There's an element of the bigger the projects you work on, so the larger enterprise scenarios, the more specialized you need to be, and the more of an expert somebody is in one area. But if you don't work on those projects, when you work in smaller projects, you have to become an expert, a lower level expert in lots of different things. So I think there's a case of, and there's definitely scenarios for both, because on that enterprise level, you need people who are absolute wizards at SQL. But at that lower level, you don't need people who are wizards at SQL. You need people who know possibly a bit of SQL, a bit of Power BI, a bit of Excel, a bit of lots of different things. And just because you have a lower level skill across all those things doesn't mean that you're not an expert. You just aren't as specialized in one specific area.
Yeah, there's definitely in being, I keep using the term literate, having a level of literacy across multiple avenues. Maybe that is a version of an expert, isn't it? Somebody that's got that kind of broad understanding of everything.
Always learning.
It's interesting to me though, like Sue, you compare yourself to Marco, who's, I mean, my God, like one of the very, very best people globally. Maybe that's another general characteristic of people doing similar things to us, where you're suddenly looking at like the global level experts and going, oh God, yeah, I'm not there yet, which is a pretty hard stick to measure yourself against.
I know, but you always want to aspire, don't you, to learn, and but I think I'm at the. I know who I like to learn from, and who like with and where I go for different things. But gosh,
you mentioned community, Sue, and that's another thing that's jumped out to me recently. I mean, I always seem to mention Dim, but Dim early, and I would say Eric Owen are two people. Example in our space where Dim has created all of these crazily clever lambdas, and he uses them for Excel battles. He could have kept them all to himself and given himself a massive edge. But what he's done is shared it publicly. He'll be doing YouTube videos on lots of the lambdas to help other people learn them. Eric Ohm's built this insane Excel add-in OA robot that I've started beta testing, which is bonkers. And genuinely, like the free version he's going to give away will be really powerful. And even the paid version will be really, really cheap. He's doing it because he just wants to throw more knowledge back in the community, which is amazing.
Well, that's how they started. Daniel started with Tableau Editor. Tableau Editor, the Tableau Editor 2 is completely free, and he built it to help himself. And then it's given it to the community, and it will always be free. But you then get people that will help you, like we referred to earlier. People then look at what you're doing and say, well, actually, you could do it this way. And you get lots of brains then working on, how to improve and how to get better, which is always fun. And we do like showing off to each other, don't we? And sharing. I've done it this way, I've done it that way. And finding people that are interested enough to go through your code a bit of a time and go,
I guess in a way, there's a lot of people around us that love giving back to the community, and I count myself among them. And it's fun. You explore, you learn a lot yourself, and it feels good to be able to help others. But in a way, it's not sustainable if there is no way for these people to get some income. So I guess that example for Tabular Editor, I think it's amazing what they made available for free. And I really hope that their enterprise product is giving them enough returns to continue developing it. Because in the end, we all need to be able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But if it's just enough, we don't need to live like kings. But then we can just keep on giving, and I think it's just such a nice area to work in.
Yeah. Tableau Editor 3, the commercial product, is very, very good. But it's a useful tool. Very useful.
Do we want to have a quick look at some of the comments we received on LinkedIn?
There's one from this bloke called Win Hopkins.
Win who?
I think he's like an Excel Power BI guy. I don't rate him much, but he's left.
He doesn't run, and he hasn't got a dog.
What did he say, Mark? What did he say?
He said, "Okay, this is what you become an expert when you're aware of what you don't know." I think that's good. You can evaluate multiple options before applying a solution. I think we've mentioned that. You can explain something to someone. You can explain something to someone else clearly. You can explain something so someone else clearly understands your explanation.
Did you do that on purpose?
No, that was just my inability to string a sentence together.
I thought you were being super clever then.
Win made some sensible points. Somebody, Adiolu, put "my boss," which I strongly disagree with. I'm assuming that he meant that just means your boss is an expert. Whoa.
Or your boss determines when you're an expert.
Oh, not sure I agree with that either.
Maybe. But...
Somebody said, "Who is Giles?" which I found immensely offensive. Thanks, Eddie. Philip said, "I once heard a definition of expert that I quite like. You are the expert in the room if you know more about a topic than the rest of the room," which is pretty similar to what we were saying.
And then Shirley Mormon had a good comment. So I see expertise as a sliding scale rather than something you become. Do I have a decent level of expertise in Excel? Yes, enough to earn a living from it. But there are others who are way beyond my level, but I'm always learning and improving. So Shirley's view is that it's a sliding scale and not something that you become. Is it one of those things? It's the journey rather than the destination.
Yes, that's very yoga-like, Mark.
Well, that I was just paraphrasing Shirley there. So I think that's so it's all about the journey that you go on and continually improving.
Yes.
Right, I've got 2 more jingles for this part of the show. But the first one was directed at Mark, because at this stage, what I expected was for Mark to be kind of tearing his hair out. But actually, I feel like I'm tearing what fancy hair I have. But let's play a little brief clip of jingle 3, just to get the sense of where I thought we'd be at this stage.
Mark, please don't stop Giles from shining bright. You just have to trust him with all your might. Remember that you nominated him for the spotlight. So basically this is all your own plight. But Giles will make it all work out in the end. You just have to trust him and call him a friend. No need to worry, just sit back and smile. The truth is we might be here a little while. Mark, remember
Goes on for another 2 minutes.
part of the game. Don't point fingers, don't place too much blame.
Oh, I failed it.
So that was my segue into the main topic. And even without Win, we've done exactly the same thing and got 3/4 of the way in before we get to the main topic. Really glad we've got you here for this, Rick. Are technical books still useful in the Google / AI world? Well, I think we have to start with you, don't we?
Are technical books still relevant in the age of AI? That's a good one. I think we're going to have to assume that the state of AI is as it is now, because I think I might answer differently in a couple of years. But for now, I think of having a book, like writing the book that I wrote like in the last half year, the definitive guide to Power Query. It's really about some structured learning here, getting your thoughts together, making sure people actually go on a journey with you. So they can start in the beginning of the book. They might take any order that they like, but if they want to, they could start in the beginning and follow a journey towards a state where they understand more. So the fundamentals of a topic, you can really lay the groundworks and make sure people can follow that journey. And whereas a book for me is a journey, I feel like AI gets to the end point right away. So instead of taking you from the start and making sure that you understand, AI just tells you like, hey, I got this solution for you. I can give you some basic instruction and you can go ahead with those solutions and have it solved. But now think of this scenario. Let's say that you're working with AI and they're explaining for you how some code runs. And you're using this in a production environment with your customer. And in 2 weeks, your customer comes to you and says like, Rick, you got this code in here, but for some reason, everything is wrong. There's a mistake. Things are broken. What went wrong? Now, let's say you didn't actually understand that code. I think you're in quite an awkward situation to explain that customer that you copy pasted this AI solution and that you have no clue what it's doing. So for me, yeah, there's absolutely a role in those technical books as of right now. In a way, what I also really like about putting your experience in a book is we humans are so wired for story, right? So if I want to explain something to you, I might compare it to something I have experienced in another field that everybody is used to. And you can connect the dots in ways that AI might not know of because it simply doesn't exist. For instance, the Power Query book that we wrote, there were a lot of topics that we actually had to research for weeks before we could actually write on how things worked, how you could use it. And AI is not in a state right now where it can think and make up out of nothing, verify whether it's correct, and then come up with an entire chapter. Because it makes use of all of the information that's out there. but it doesn't have any availability at this point to verify whether code works. So whenever you get an answer, you'll also be left with, is it hallucinating? Or is this actually true? Yes or no?
I think Rick made at the start, Rick made a really good point about structured learning, which I think, it goes for courses or technical books. And I think so often in the age of not just AI, but also in kind of, you can Google things, people watch YouTube videos. Actually, it's each of those one things that we solve is a bit like going shopping for knowledge, right? And we go into the bakery aisle and we pick up some flour. That's the first bit of knowledge that we've gained from somewhere, and then we go into the clothing aisle and we pick up a t-shirt, and then we go into the pet aisle and we pick up some cat litter. And the truth is that we've got these disparate bits of things, and maybe we get home and we're like, what are we going to do with these, right? So actually having a structured learning path in a technical book is fantastic, because it says, right, if you want to cook a meal, yeah, you might need some flour, but you're going to need a whole load of other stuff that's actually food. So therefore, it then helps you to collect all of that stuff together to provide a relevant solution. If you want to buy clothes, you probably don't just need a t-shirt, you need a few other things. So therefore, for a different solution, you need a different group of things. But otherwise, if we're picking and choosing by just looking at YouTube videos or just getting questions answered by AI, it's like we're just picking random bits without really understanding how it all fits together or how it works together. And I think from an expertise perspective, as we were talking about before, is you can't just have cherry picked some things, because that doesn't. Then when it comes to solutions, you actually have to apply all of that knowledge to then get something that works. So I think that piece around bringing all those thoughts together in a package and actually covering the most, in courses or in books, there's always the basics that you have to cover. So, in Power Query or an M, one of the things that people never discuss is what's a value. We all come, we're like, here's a table, right? I now need to change my table, and we then get a column in our table that contains the tables, and we go, well, that's confusing. Why is a column in a table? How do I change this table and do that? But we've never actually taken the time to even understand what a value is. So, in Rick's book, it goes into lots of things. What's a value? How do values work? How are values structured? You've got different kinds of values. You've got the primitive values, and then you've got the complex values. And without understanding that, anything you do in Power Query, you're just kind of almost implementing some level of rote knowledge or just clicking buttons. But once you understand what values are, how they work, what data types are, then it's almost like whatever scenario you face, I understand what I'm working with here, what the ingredients are and how I can put them together. So I think there's huge value in technical books. There's huge value in courses, because where else is someone going to cover that? No one's going to record a YouTube video about these are values in Power Query. If they did, the views would be in the floor. It'd be like 20 views. The algorithm would never promote it to anyone, even though it's exceptionally high value. So that's, there's definitely value there, because otherwise those topics just don't get covered. And that's what we need to know. We need to have a deep understanding of basic things so we can then apply them in more and more complex scenarios.
If I can add to that, to the same question of whether you're an expert and to the same part of the value of technical books, I also had to think of, I feel like you're an expert when you come up with solutions, you have the knowledge and the perspective to be able to say that, to confidently say without any external help, that this is probably the right solution for the situation.
Yeah.
If you're going to come up with an AI solution, or if AI provides it to you, I'll say it like that, I don't think you're ever going to be in a state where you're like, I feel confident that this is the right solution for you. And that might be discerning. I'm not sure if you're going to feel comfortable always having to trust on that. And then what happens when AI is down and it's not working and the internet is not here? Well, let's say, I guess we can do our other work either. But the point is more, I wonder if you want to depend on that. Please.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you said a bit earlier your opinion might change in a few years, because I think I'm in the same headspace as you. And I always think of things like self-driving cars. At the moment, would it be better if you sat in the driver's seat, even if you're not driving, had the capability of grabbing the steering wheel and being able to deal with something if it went wrong? 100%. But in 5-10 years time, would we genuinely still need the skill? Possibly not at all. It might be so good and so reliable. Maybe it'll get there in our sort of workspace as well.
I think for me, it depends what I'm doing and where I am. So, I've got lots and lots of technical books, and some I've gone into and flipped in and out, and others I've read from cover to cover several times, depending on how much I want to know about a particular topic and where I am in my learning journey throughout it. And also where I am learning. So if I'm traveling and I haven't got access to the internet or such, a book's great, because you can almost structure, today I'm going to do that chapter, that chapter, that chapter, so you can work your way through it. And I like that about courses as well. I like to complete things. So if I start a course, I like to go through and make sure I've completed the courses. So that gives me a really thorough understanding, as does a book. But then you want to flip in to answer questions and sometimes to validate. And I use AI almost like as a back and forth thing, where I might say, I'm thinking about doing this. What are these solutions? What's this? What do you think of, so you're almost using it sometimes to, bounce ideas and consider things. But, generally I have an idea, but I always use it as as a nice way, as, almost like a sandbox where you can chuck ideas around and see what comes up. And, quite often it's what you expect, but when it's not, then it makes you think about it. But definitely books and courses, they give you the structure, and certification also, I think, gives you a structure, because it goes back to what we said before. If you're not working with something in your role, then certification makes sure that you cover the broad areas of everything that you should know for that type of topic, so that if things come up, it gives you an art of the possible, and just to think, should I be doing it this way, or there are other ways? So it's a bit structured and unstructured learning.
Going back to that thought earlier about the small fish in a big fish in a small pond, is that no matter what size fish you are, what size pond you're in, once you get a technical book, you're then in an ocean, right? Because suddenly you've got somebody has taken the time to research. And as Rick said, in his book, there's areas that no one's written about before. It's just understanding how it works and how all those bits really fit together, and digging down into it. Once you start looking at technical books, it opens up an entire universe of things that you didn't know. When you think about the unknown unknowns, you get a book and suddenly you have all these unknown unknowns just coming at you, and hopefully you can absorb some of those, and that's a lot of what does turn you into an expert. Sorry, Giles, I cut you off there. What have you?
No, it's fine. I was actually just going to ask Rick. I wonder if you would be happy sharing a little bit of like what that experience was like, putting that amazingly complex and comprehensive is the word, not complex, comprehensive book together, because it wasn't just you, was it? But how long did it take? What was that whole experience like?
Greg.
Yeah, I could share a little bit on that. So we started writing the book with actually the four of us. So here's the cover, where you can see Greg right there and Melissa on the side. And when starting out, Brian Julius was also part of the writing team.
Yeah.
But later on, he had to jump out. But he was still involved in discussions. And yeah, we really got together at the start, brainstorming on what kind of topics do we want to cover at all, and in what order do we think this is relevant. And what you may not know is that I actually didn't want to be part of the book.
Why not? Why not?
So it was Greg and Brian who reached out on, Rick, we're writing this book. We think you would be a good fit. You want to be part of one of the writers. And I was like, well, I started making a course a while ago on financial reporting, and I quit. And I now promised myself I'm going to make an M course, and that's what I'm about to do. So you're asking me now to make time for writing a book, and I just promised myself that I'm not going to cancel this course this time. So I'm sorry, but I don't think I can make it. So then they asked me, like, okay, could you at least help us maybe make the table of contents so we can structure it, and then we're good to go for at least seeing if a publisher wants to publish it. So I was like, yeah, sure, I can help you there. So we had this table of contents out there, and he's like, I know you're not going to write, but let's say you would. Which chapters would you take? And I was like, well, I would probably take some of the complex ones because a lot of topics I already know, and I probably want to research the others. But really, that would not be in the coming months. That would be like next year or so. And I don't know what they were doing or if it was on purpose. But yeah, that really got me thinking over the weeks after. And I was discussing this with a couple of friends, and the first thing they said was like, Rick, if you postpone that course a little bit, isn't this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? You don't have to write it by yourself. You have an experienced author with you. Well, and I guess you've seen the release, so eventually I did get persuaded to get started.
I don't think Brian and Greg would take no for an answer. I can imagine, I can actually see in my head Brian substitute. Well, Rick, if you could just, that would just be great. And, it's a clever man, clever men, those two.
I guess their master plan in the end worked out. And basically, we started to plan like a catch-up every single week. So we divided the chapters, and we started writing. And we just wanted to get the first chapters out as soon as possible so we could get used to what the feedback would look like from the publisher.
Yeah. And it must have been a real joy to work with the team, because they are, it's something you're passionate about, and all three of them are just such sources of information.
I guess the biggest fun is that even if you choose to do a chapter yourself, there's always the discussions you're going to have on Monday, and everybody has their perspectives on, oh, wait a minute, I saw this cool article this week that might be relevant for your chapter, or have you actually considered approaching this topic from this corner? And sometimes we would also disagree. I remember talking with Brian about the topic of data types, and while he was already making an argument of what data types are for, I remember having a discussion with him saying, like, okay, let's say I'm going to be blunt here, and I said that data types don't matter at all. How would you defend this statement? I'm like, well, it recognizes the values, it can automatically transform it to different types, but you don't need to assign a data type at all. So does it really matter? And I remember we were talking about that, and at some point we scrapped like the entire text, and I think we started over, and it was just really fun seeing how that developed, basically.
It's very interesting as well, I guess, that, for people who are, well, certainly in our eyes, like genuine experts, you actually all, I guess, come away even more expert from the experience of writing the book, like you said, because you've done so much research, you've actually been sharing knowledge amongst you. So the four of you are even more high-end experts than you were before you wrote the book.
I feel like it's so much clearer after writing this, because we also had to structure everything in a way like, okay, if we want to be able to cover this topic, we were wrong at the table of contents at the start because we need to introduce certain concepts earlier. So we've been shuffling everything around and then basically figuring out in what edge cases certain concepts work and when they stop working. That was a real eye opener for the M language, to me anyway. For instance, if you set up queries in Power Query, then there is a concept called ascription. You can ascribe a data type, which is different from changing a data type, because changing a data type does some checks. So basically, you could say, I have a text value, I'm going to transform it to a number, and it will perform some checks to see, like, hey, can I actually see this as a number? And if you try that with a letter, then it will give you an error if you change a type. But if I instead say, I have a text value within a table, and I'm going to specify the data type of that column within a table, I'm going to ascribe it. Then what that does is it's going to give a label to it. So it's going to say, like, okay, I'm going to assume that this is now a number value, even though there's a text in there. I don't perform any check at all, so you're not going to get an error. until you load your data into Power BI. And then it will give you an error somewhere, and it will not show you where in your queries the error exists. So everybody is left like, hey, there's errors, but I don't even see where they come from. And this leaves all of the users so puzzled. And having clarity on what causes this, it's so helpful.
Yeah, I remember that journey. Just like, well, why? I don't understand. Because everything you can see looks like it should be a number, but of course, further up, it's not necessarily where you can't see it.
Awesome. We're a little bit over time. Rick, you've definitely got more noises that your mixer can make. Do you want to just play one or two right at the end, just to play a little bit of music?
Were you just saying, Giles, that we're reaching the end of the podcast?
We're reaching the end, Rick.
Oh, there. I've got another jingle. I've got an exit jingle, which I think we don't normally hear it on the YouTube, but do you want to hear a little snippet, and then we'll do some cool editing afterwards to make sure that it goes in full on the podcast. It mentions your name again, Rick, so I'm really keen for you to hear it.
Let's go. Let's hear it.
This is 5, Mark. 4, I'm giving up on. It doesn't work. It was all about me being cocky and happy, and I'm not, because you've all ruined it. Just go to 5.
Okay, here we go.
Goodbye, Excel lovers. Our time has come to an end. With cells and rows in our hearts, we leave as better friends. Rick, you are the best. We really needed you today. Sue and Mark were worried, but total chaos was kept at bay. Goodbye, Unpivot listeners. May your sheets shine bright. Power Query is your friend, and Rick de Groot is your guiding light.
Beautiful.
To all the rows and columns, know that it always starts with you. You bring us so much joy. Without you, we'd be feeling really blue. We laughed, we cried, we conquered cells so small. In sheets we find our stories bound.
Goes on for another 2 minutes.
Walls.
You can fade out whenever you want.
Goodbye, Unpivot listeners. May your sheets shine bright.
This is the settings of my new mic. Heb ik niks veranderd.
Oh, what's that? What was that? Like 5 Ricks talking at the same time.
Yeah, Wynn's definitely more upbeat than you. His are more like sort of jazzy stuff, whereas yours is more like swinging, swayy stuff.
What's your point?
I don't know. It's just something that feels swingy, swayy or mellow. I thought it would be a bit more.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Jingle 4 was actually very upbeat, because that was me going like, "Yeah, I'm running the show," but it doesn't work.
We love the Unpivot show. It's just so cool. Excel nerds will listen because it makes them drool. Giles still breathing against all the odds. Mark hasn't killed him yet.
I figured that one out.
On that happy note, should we say goodbye?
I think we should.
Well done.
Yeah, I
Giles.
thoroughly enjoyed the jingles, Giles. I don't know how you create them, but great addition. Thank you.
It's an app called Suno. I only know it because Wynn showed me. But yeah, I'll send you your jingle. Thanks for bringing a mixer with sound effects on as well.
I love that.
Been brilliant to have you on. Really, really cool.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Right, we'll see you all next time.
We'll see you as
Take
well,
care.
Wynn.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.